Marcus Chen wiped the grease from his hands and stared at the engine core he had been repairing for the past 6 hours. The deep space mining station hummed around him with its usual mechanical rhythm, a sound that had become as familiar as his own heartbeat after 3 years of work. In this remote corner of the galaxy, the communication panel on the wall suddenly blazed to life with a priority signal that made every worker in the STIA engineering base stop and turn their heads. Marcus Chen. Report to the command center immediately. The station commander's voice crackled through the speakers with an urgency that sent a chill down Marcus's spine. He had never been summoned like this before, not in all his time working on Station Theta 9, and the worried glances from his fellow engineers told him they found it just as strange. Marcus made his way through the narrow corridors of the station, his mind racing through possibilities. Had he made some terrible mistake? Was there a critical system failure? Had something happened to his family back on Earth? The command center doors slid open to reveal Commander Williams standing beside a figure that made Marcus stop in his tracks. The alien was tall and elegant, with silver skin that seemed to shimmer under the station's lights and eyes that held an unsettling intelligence. Mr. Chen, this is Ambassador Corin of the Calrish Empire, Commander Williams said, and his voice carried a weight that Marcus had never heard before. The ambassador stepped forward and inclined his head in what Marcus recognized as a formal Calrish greeting, one that he had only seen in diplomatic broadcasts. Marcus Chen, human engineer and citizen of Earth, Ambassador Corin began, his voice smooth and melodious despite speaking standard English. You have been chosen for a great honor by Queen Velaris herself. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Nothing good ever started with the words great honor when it came to dealing with alien royalty. The Queen's daughter, Princess Shara, has reached her coming of understanding, the ambassador continued, pulling out a crystalline tablet that displayed swirling alien script. By ancient tradition, she must spend 1 full Calrish year learning from a life-sharer chosen from another species. And you want me to teach a princess? Marcus asked, unable to keep the disbelief from his voice. Not teach, Ambassador Corin corrected, his expression becoming more serious. You will share your life with her. Show her how humans live and think and survive. She will accompany you in your daily activities, learn your customs, understand your perspective on existence. Commander Williams cleared his throat and gestured for Marcus to sit down, which he did gratefully because his legs suddenly felt weak. This is not a request. Mr. Chen, the commander said quietly, the Calrish Empire has issued a royal edict. Refusing would be considered a grave insult and could damage human-Calrish relations significantly. Marcus rubbed his face with both hands, trying to process what he was hearing. He was just an engineer, a guy who fixed broken machines and enjoyed the simple life of deep space work, far from the complications of politics and diplomacy. How long is a Calrish year? He managed to ask. Approximately 18 Earth months, Ambassador Corin replied. 18 months of his life, given over to babysitting an alien princess who probably thought humans were primitive newcomers to the galactic stage. Marcus had seen enough diplomatic footage to know how the Calrish viewed humanity, with polite tolerance at best, barely concealed contempt at worst. Why me? Marcus asked, looking directly at the ambassador. There are human diplomats, scholars, military officers who would be better suited for this. Ambassador Corin's expression softened slightly, the first hint of something other than formal protocol. The Queen chose you precisely because you are none of those things, he explained. Princess Shara has spent her entire life surrounded by warriors, scholars, and politicians. What she needs to understand is how ordinary people live, how they face challenges without royal resources, how they find meaning in simple work. And humans are known for surviving impossible situations, Commander Williams added. Our species has a reputation for adapting to harsh conditions and thriving where others would fail. That's what the Queen wants her daughter to learn. Marcus sat in silence for a long moment, weighing his options, which seemed to be exactly zero. Refusing meant causing an international incident. Accepting meant leaving behind everything he knew for a year and a half. When do I leave? He finally asked, resignation heavy in his voice. Tomorrow morning, Ambassador Corin said. And there was something that might have been sympathy in his alien eyes. A royal transport will arrive to take you to the capital world. You will be provided with appropriate quarters, a generous stipend, and access to royal resources. Will I be able to communicate with my family? Of course. You are not a prisoner, Marcus Chun. You are an honored guest of the royal family. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of details and instructions. Marcus would need to pack only personal items. Formal attire would be provided. He would be briefed on court protocols during the journey, and above all, he must remember that he represented all of humanity in the eyes of the Cowrish court when Ambassador Corin finally left. Commander Williams poured 2 glasses of whiskey from his personal stash and handed one to Marcus. For what it's worth. I think you're the right choice, the commander said, raising his glass. You're honest, hardworking, and you don't put on airs. If anyone can show these aliens what humanity is really about, it's someone like you. Marcus drained his glass in one gulp, feeling the burn down his throat. That night, as he packed his few belongings in his cramped quarters, Marcus looked out the viewport at the stars and wondered what he had done in a past life to deserve this. He was being sent to live with alien royalty, to share his ordinary human life with a princess who probably despised the very idea of spending time with someone she considered. Beneath her, the mining station had been his home, his refuge from the chaos of Earth and the complexities of human society. And now he was being thrust into the heart of alien politics whether he wanted it or no. Thought about his parents back on Earth. His sister who would laugh until she cried when she heard about this. And his friends who would never believe it tomorrow. His life would change in ways he couldn't even imagine. Tomorrow, he would leave behind everything familiar and step into a world of crystal palaces, ancient traditions, and royal intrigue. Marcus Chun, human engineer, was about to become something he never wanted to be. A teacher to alien royalty, a representative of his entire species, and the life share of a princess who would probably hate him on sight. He finished packing, set his alarm, and tried to sleep, knowing that rest would be impossible, but needing to try anyway. The stars outside his window seemed to mock him with their indifferent twinkling. And somewhere among them, on a world he had never seen, a princess was probably just as unhappy about this arrangement as he was, at least. Marcus thought grimly. They would have that much in common. The Crystal Palace lived up to its name in ways that made Marcus's eyes hurt. Every surface seemed to be made of some translucent material that caught the light of 3 suns and scattered it into rainbow patterns across floors, walls, and ceilings. Ambassador Corin led him through corridors so vast that Marcus felt like an insect crawling through a cathedral. And the Cowrish courtiers they passed looked at him with expressions, ranging from curiosity to barely concealed disdain. The princess awaits you in the Garden of Reflection, Corin said as they walked. Remember to bow when you first see her. Address her as Your Highness until she gives you permission otherwise, and do not speak unless spoken to. Marcus bit back a sarcastic comment about all the ways this was already going wrong. He had spent the entire 3-day journey memorizing protocol and etiquette, and his head felt stuffed with rules that seemed designed to make every interaction as awkward as possible. They entered a garden that defied description. Plants from 100 worlds grew in carefully arranged sections. Water flowed upward in defiance of gravity, and the air smelled of flowers. Marcus had no names for Princess Shara stood beside a fountain with her back to them, her posture so rigid it looked painful. She wore robes of deep blue that flowed around her like liquid, and her silver skin seemed to glow with an inner light. "Your Highness," Ambassador Corinne announced, "I present Marcus Chun, human engineer, who will serve as your life sharer by royal edict." The princess turned slowly, and Marcus got his first look at the person he would spend the next 18 months with. She was young by Cowrish standards, perhaps, equivalent to a human in her early 20s, with sharp features and eyes that assessed him. With cold calculation, Marcus bowed as he had been taught. Keeping his eyes down, "Rise," Shara said, her voice cutting through the garden's peace like a blade. "Let me see what the queen has decided I must endure." He straightened and met her gaze, seeing nothing but contempt there. "You are smaller than I expected," she continued, walking around him in a slow circle. "Humans are supposed to be these great survivors, these adaptable warriors. Yet you look like a common laborer." "That's because I am a common laborer, Your Highness," Marcus replied, keeping his voice neutral despite the insult. "I'm an engineer. I fix things." Her eyes narrowed dangerously. "In our culture, one does not speak so casually to royalty," she said coldly. "You will address me with proper deference, use formal speech patterns, and remember your place." Something in Marcus snapped. He had traveled across the galaxy, left behind his life, and accepted this ridiculous arrangement, all to be treated like dirt by a spoiled princess who probably had never faced a real problem in her pampered existence. "With respect, Your Highness," he said, putting just enough emphasis on the title to make it sound less than respectful. "I'm here because your mother ordered it, not because either of us wants this. I'm supposed to share my life with you and teach you about humanity, but I can't do that if I have to speak like I swallowed a dictionary." Ambassador Corinne made a strangled sound, and several courtiers who had been pretending not to listen gasped audibly. Shara's face went through several expressions before settling on icy fury. "You dare speak to me this way?" "I dare to be honest," Marcus shot back. "Isn't that what this whole life share thing is about? Learning how other species really live, think, and communicate? Well, humans don't talk like formal protocol manuals, and we definitely don't pretend to respect people who treat us like we're beneath them." The silence that followed was so complete that Marcus could hear the fountain's water flowing upward then. To everyone's shock, Queen Valaris's voice echoed through the garden from hidden speakers. "Well said, Marcus Chen." The queen spoke with amusement clear in her tone. "Shara, you would do well to remember that this human has agreed to share his life with you as a gift, not because he owes you anything. Treat him with the respect due to a teacher, or this arrangement ends immediately." Shara's face flushed a darker silver, humiliation and anger warring in her expression. "Yes, mother," she said through gritted teeth. The queen's presence departed as mysteriously as it had arrived, and Ambassador Corin looked like he wanted to be anywhere else in the galaxy. "I will show you to your quarters," Shara said stiffly, turning away. "Follow me." Marcus followed her through the palace, noting how other Calorish scattered before her, like leaves before a storm. She walked with her head high, radiating wounded pride, and he found himself feeling an unexpected flicker of sympathy. They reached a suite of rooms that was larger than his entire apartment back on Earth, filled with furniture that looked uncomfortable and decorations that meant nothing to him. "These are your quarters," Shara announced, still not looking at him. "Meals will be brought to you. You are not to wander the palace without an escort, and we will meet each morning for whatever activities you deem appropriate." She started to leave, but Marcus called after her, "Your Highness." "Wait." Shara paused but did not turn around. "I know you didn't want this," Marcus said quietly, "and for what it's worth, neither did I. But we're stuck with each other for the next 18 months, so maybe we could try not making each other miserable. You have already made me look foolish in front of the court," she replied, her voice tight with anger. My mother had to publicly correct me because a human could not follow simple protocol. I wasn't trying to make you look bad, Marcus insisted. I was just being honest about how humans actually communicate. We're direct. We don't hide behind fancy words, and we value authenticity over formality. Finally, she turned to face him, and her expression was a mix of confusion and lingering anger. Why did the Queen choose you? She asked, and for the first time, she sounded genuinely curious rather than contemptuous. Of all the humans in the galaxy, why a simple engineer? Marcus shrugged, a very human gesture that looked out of place in the elegant palace. Maybe because I'm ordinary, he said. Maybe because I represent what most humans are actually like. Not the diplomats and leaders you see in official meetings. We're not all heroes and geniuses. We're just people trying to do our jobs and live our lives. Shara studied him for a long moment, her alien features unreadable. Tomorrow morning, we begin, she finally said. I expect you at the Garden of Reflection at dawn. Do not be late. She swept out of the room, leaving Marcus alone in his oversized quarters. He collapsed onto a couch that was definitely not designed for human comfort, and stared at the ceiling. This was going to be the longest 18 months of his life, and they had only just started. The princess clearly hated him. The court thought he was a barbaric fool, and he had already managed to insult royalty within hours of arriving. But somewhere in that confrontation, he had seen something flicker. Across Shara's face when he talked about being ordinary and authentic, a brief moment of uncertainty, as if she had never considered that perspective before. Maybe, just maybe, there was hope that this wouldn't be a complete disaster. Marcus closed his eyes and tried to find something resembling optimism. He failed, but at least he had tried, and trying against impossible odds was about as human as it got. 3 months had passed and Marcus's arrival at the Crystal Palace, and the relationship between him and Princess Shara had evolved from open hostility to something closer to wary coexistence. They spent their mornings in the Garden of Reflection, where Marcus tried to explain human concepts that seemed utterly foreign to Cowrish thinking. He talked about humor as a way to cope with pain, about finding beauty in imperfection, about the strength that came from admitting weakness. Hera listened with varying degrees of interest, sometimes asking sharp questions that showed she was actually thinking about what he said, other times dismissing his words as primitive philosophy. But something had started to shift. It began when Marcus noticed that the food deliveries to the lower palace levels were being delayed, causing the servants to go hours without proper meals. When he mentioned it to Shara during one of their sessions, she waved it off as a minor administrative issue. Those servants are well compensated, she had said. Missing one meal is hardly a tragedy. Marcus had stared at her in disbelief. Have you ever missed a meal, Your Highness? He asked quietly. Of course not. That would be, she paused, understanding slowly dawning in her eyes. I see your point. The next day, the delivery schedule was corrected, and Marcus noticed Shara looking thoughtful during their entire session. He started pushing harder after that. Your Highness, when was the last time you left the palace? He asked one morning. I attend ceremonial functions regularly, she replied. Just last month I visited the Museum of Ancient History. I mean really left, Marcus pressed. Walked through ordinary streets, saw how regular people live. Talked to someone who wasn't a courtier or noble. Shara's expression became defensive. That would be inappropriate for someone of my station, she said stiffly. The princess does not mingle with commoners. How can you rule people you don't understand? Marcus challenged. I understand them perfectly well from reports and statistics. Statistics don't tell you what it feels like to struggle, to worry about feeding your family, to work all day and still not have enough. Their argument was interrupted by alarms blaring throughout the palace. Ambassador Corinne burst into the garden with panic clear on his face. There's been an attack on Settlement 7, he announced. A terrorist group has bombed the market district. There are casualties. Shara stood immediately, her training taking over. What does the guard report? The response team is 20 minutes away, Curran said. But the settlement's infrastructure is damaged. There are fires, collapsed buildings, people trapped. Marcus was already moving toward the door. Where's the nearest transport? He demanded. Marcus, wait, Shara called after him. You're not authorized. People are dying right now, he shouted back. And I'm an engineer who knows how to stabilize structures and put out fires. Authorization can wait. Something changed in Shara's expression. A decision crystallizing. Ambassador, prepare a royal shuttle, she ordered. We're going to Settlement 7. Your Highness. The security risks. Now, Ambassador, 10 minutes later. They were racing through the sky toward the settlement, and Marcus could see smoke rising in dark columns from what had been a bustling market. The shuttle landed in chaos. People were running, screaming, trying to pull survivors from wreckage while fires raged unchecked. Marcus didn't wait for permission. He jumped from the shuttle and ran toward the nearest collapsed building where he could hear voices crying for help. Marcus! Shara's voice called behind him, but he was already assessing the structure, looking for weak points and safe zones. A young Calorish female was trapped under a beam, her leg crushed and bleeding. Marcus dropped to his knees beside her and began examining the wreckage. Get me something to use as a lever, he shouted to anyone listening. And I need fabric for a tourniquet. Shara appeared beside him, tearing strips from her royal robes without hesitation. Tell me what to do, she said. And there was no trace of the haughty princess in her voice. Now Marcus showed her how to apply pressure to slow the bleeding, while he worked to free the trapped woman. Other survivors gathered around, and he directed them with quick efficiency born from years of emergency training that all deep space workers received. They freed the woman and moved to the next crisis. A building that was about to collapse with people still inside. Everyone back. Marcus yelled, "That support column is failing," but a child's voice cried out from inside. And without thinking, Marcus ran toward the building. "Marcus, no!" Shara screamed. He made it inside, found the boy huddled in a corner, and grabbed him. But as they turned to leave, the building groaned ominously. Marcus threw the child toward the door, where Shara caught him. And then the ceiling came down. Everything went dark. When consciousness returned, Marcus found himself in a medical bay with Shara sitting beside his bed. Her face was streaked with tears, which he had never seen from a Calorish before. "You fool," she said, her voice breaking. "You could have died." "The kid?" Marcus managed to croak. "Safe. You got him out in time." The building collapsed seconds after. Marcus tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as pain shot through his ribs. "The medical team says you have a concussion. 3 cracked ribs and severe bruising," Shara continued. "But you'll recover." She was quiet for a moment, her hands twisting in her lap. "I watched you today," she said softly. "I watched you run toward danger without hesitation. Organize people you had never met. Risk your life for strangers. And I realized something." "What's that?" Marcus asked. "I have lived my entire life in the palace, learning tactics and history and protocol, being told I was prepared to rule." Shara's voice was barely a whisper now. "But I've never actually done anything. When that alarm sounded, my first thought was to wait for reports, to let others handle it, to stay safe." "That's not wrong." "It is wrong," she interrupted. "You showed me today what leadership actually means. It's not about giving orders from a throne. It's about being willing to do what needs to be done, even when it's dangerous or difficult." Marcus saw something new in her eyes. "Respect." "Your Highness, Shara," she corrected. "You've more than earned the right to use my name, Shara," Marcus said, testing the name. "What you did today was brave too. You could have stayed on the shuttle, but you got your hands dirty helping people." "Because you showed me I had to," she replied. because watching you made me ashamed of the distance I've kept from my own people." She stood and walked to the window. "Looking out at the city below, I want to go back," she said suddenly. "Not to Settlement 7, but to the lower city here in the capital. I want you to show me how ordinary people live, what they struggle with, what they need. Your mother might not approve. My mother chose you to teach me." Shara turned back to face him with determination in her alien features. "And today you taught me the most important lesson, that I cannot rule people I do not truly know or understand." Marcus smiled despite the pain. "When I'm healed, we'll go," he promised, "but you'll need a disguise. And you'll have to leave your royal attitudes at the palace." "Agreed," Shara said, and for the first time since they met. She smiled at him. It was a small smile, uncertain and unpracticed. But it transformed her face from cold beauty to something genuine and warm. Marcus realized with surprise that he was starting to like the princess. And even more surprising, she seemed to be starting to like him back, maybe. He thought as exhaustion pulled him towards sleep. This arrangement wasn't going to be the disaster he had feared. Maybe they could actually learn from each other. Maybe that was what the Queen had planned all along. The disguised visits to the lower city had become a regular part of Marcus and Shara's routine. 3 times a week, the princess would shed her royal robes, dress in simple clothing, and venture into the parts of the capital she had never seen. Marcus watched her change over those weeks. She learned to talk to merchants without expecting deference, to listen to workers' complaints without dismissing them, to see problems that statistics had hidden from the palace's view. But everything changed when news reached the Crystal Palace of an attack on one of the Kaurish colony worlds, the Zerathi Collective. A hostile alien faction that had been quiet for decades had destroyed an entire settlement on the frontier. 3,000 Kaurish colonists were dead, and the Zerathi were demanding that all Kaurish forces withdraw from what they claimed was their territory. The palace erupted into chaos. Queen Valaris called an emergency council meeting, and for the first time, Shara was expected to attend as an observer. Marcus accompanied her to the council chamber. Standing against the wall, while the most powerful figures in the Kaurish Empire argued about their response, Lord Tessic, the Queen's chief military advisor, stood before the assembled council with maps displaying the disputed territory. "Your Majesty, the response is obvious," he declared, his voice ringing with certainty. "We must mobilize the fleet and crush the Zerathi before they dare attack again. Anything less would be seen as weakness." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. "But the cost," another counselor protested weakly. "A war with the Zerathi would require. The cost of appearing weak is higher than any military expense." Tessic interrupted. "If we negotiate, if we show mercy, every hostile faction in the galaxy will see us as vulnerable. We must respond with overwhelming force." Marcus watched Shara's face as the council debated. She was listening intently, her expression troubled, and he could see her struggling with something. Finally, she stood, and the chamber fell silent. "Mother, may I speak?" she asked formally. Queen Valaris nodded, curiosity in her eyes. "I've been learning about leadership from my life, Shara." Shara began, her voice steady despite the weight of attention. "And one thing Marcus has taught me is that true strength sometimes means choosing the harder path, not the easier one." Lord Tessic's expression became patronizing. "Your Highness, with respect, your human teacher has no understanding of galactic politics or military necessity. He understands that every life matters." Shara shot back. "That 3,000 dead Kaurish is a tragedy. But that launching a war that could kill millions is an even greater one. So you would have us do nothing?" Tessic demanded. "Let this attack go unpunished?" "I would have us try negotiation first," Shara said, and Marcus felt pride swell in his chest. "The Zerathi claim we took their territory. Perhaps there is truth to that claim. Perhaps there is a solution that doesn't require more death." The council chamber exploded with angry voices. Nobles and military leaders shouted that the princess had been corrupted by human weakness, that mercy was foolishness, that Shara was unfit to ever rule if she couldn't understand basic power. Dynamics Lord Tessik's voice rose above the others. "This is what comes from allowing humans to influence our royalty," he declared, pointing at Marcus with contempt. "They are a weak species, barely 2 centuries into space travel, and they presume to teach us about strength." Marcus felt anger rising but kept his mouth shut. This was Shara's fight, and interrupting would only make things worse, but Tessik wasn't finished. "I challenge the human's worthiness," he announced formally. "By ancient law, I demand he face the trial of worthiness to prove that humans deserve to guide the royal bloodline." The chamber went silent. Queen Valaris's expression became grave. "You invoke the old laws, Lord Tessik?" "I do, Your Majesty." Tessik bowed. "Let this human prove his species' worth, or let him be removed from the princess's presence forever." Shara looked stricken. "Mother, this isn't necessary. The law is clear," the queen said quietly. "If a counselor challenges a life sharer's worthiness, the trial must be held. Marcus Chen, do you accept the challenge?" Marcus stepped forward, his heart pounding. "I accept," he said, because what choice did he have? The trial of worthiness was an ancient tradition, one that hadn't been invoked in over a century. It consisted of 3 tests: combat, wisdom, and sacrifice 2 days later. Marcus stood in the palace arena facing a Kalrish warrior twice his size. First trial. Combat. The trial master announced. The challenger must prove physical prowess and tactical thinking. The warrior rushed forward with speed that seemed impossible for something so large. Marcus barely dodged, rolling aside as a massive fist crashed into the ground where he had been standing. He couldn't match the Kalrish warrior in strength or reach, so he would have to use what humans were good at: adaptation and unpredictability. Marcus feinted left, then went right, using his smaller size to dart inside the warrior's guard. He struck at pressure points he had studied in Kalrish anatomy, not trying to overpower, but to unbalance. The fight lasted 20 brutal minutes. Marcus took hits that would have killed a weaker human, but he kept moving, kept thinking, kept using tactics that his opponent didn't expect. Finally, he managed to trip the warrior and pin him with a hold that the Kalrish had never encountered. The trial master called the match. First trial. Passed. Shara rushed to Marcus's side as he limped from the arena, blood streaming from his nose and the black eye already swelling shut. "You don't have to continue," she pleaded. "I'll tell Mother to end this." "Can't stop now," Marcus said through split lips. "Not when we're just getting started." The second trial took place in the council chamber. Marcus was presented with a complex political scenario involving 3 feuding colony worlds and asked to propose a solution. He studied the problem for an hour while the assembled court watched. The traditional Kalrish approach would be to impose order from above, to use authority to force compliance. But Marcus thought about what he had learned from watching humans deal with similar situations. Sometimes the best solution wasn't the most logical one. The problem isn't the disputes themselves, he finally said. It's that each colony feels unheard. They're fighting because they think conflict is the only way to get attention. And your solution? The trial master asked. Create a representative council where each colony has equal voice. Marcus proposed. Make them part of the decision-making process instead of subjects receiving orders. People fight less when they feel they have power over their own fate. The council muttered among themselves. It was an unorthodox approach, one that valued collaboration over authority. Second trial. Passed, the trial master declared. Though Lord Tessik's expression suggested he disagreed strongly, final trial was announced. The trial of sacrifice Marcus was led to a chamber where Shara was being held. The trial master explained that a deadly poison had been released in the room and there was only one dose of antidote. You must choose, the trial master said. Take the antidote and live, or give it to the princess and die. Prove that humans understand sacrifice. Marcus didn't hesitate. He grabbed the antidote and ran to Shara. Marcus, no. She screamed, take it yourself. I order you. He forced the antidote into her mouth and held her jaw closed until she swallowed. Sorry, Your Highness, he said with a weak smile, but I didn't come all this way just to watch you die. Shara was crying, beating her fists against his chest. You fool, you complete fool. Why? Then the trial master's voice boomed through the chamber. Third trial. Passed. The door opened, revealing Queen Valorous and the assembled court. There was no poison, the queen said gently. The final trial tests whether one will choose another's life over their own. Marcus Chen, you have proven your worthiness beyond any doubt. Marcus's legs gave out, and he collapsed to the floor as relief washed over him. Sharon knelt beside him, still crying. I thought you were dying, she said, her voice breaking. I thought I had lost you. Can't get rid of me that easily. Marcus managed to joke. Lord Tessic stepped forward, and to everyone's surprise, he bowed deeply to Marcus. I was wrong, he said, and the admission clearly cost him. Humans possess a strength we do not, the strength to care more about others than themselves, to value life over pride, to choose compassion over conquest. The queen addressed the council. My daughter proposed negotiation with the Zirathi, she said, and I think we should seriously consider her suggestion. Perhaps it is time for the Kalrish to learn from humanity's example. Marcus looked up at Shara and saw something in her eyes that made his chest tighten. Gratitude, respect, and something deeper that he wasn't ready to name. Thank you, she whispered. For everything. That's what friends do, he replied, and meant it with his whole heart. The negotiation with the Zirathi took 3 months of careful diplomacy. Shara led the talks with Marcus, advising her, bringing a human perspective that transformed traditional Kalrish diplomatic approaches. Instead of demanding submission, they offered partnership. Instead of threats, they proposed mutual benefit. Instead of treating the Zirathi as defeated enemies, they acknowledged the legitimacy of some grievances. It worked. The treaty was signed on a neutral station, establishing a joint human Kalrish Zirathi Council to mediate future territorial disputes. Humans were designated as official mediators, recognized for their unique ability to find middle ground between opposing positions. The Crystal Palace celebrated with a ceremony that would be recorded in history books, and Marcus stood on the dais beside Shara as queen. Valorous formally thanked him for his service, but the 18-month edict was now complete. Marcus was free to return to his old life, to the mining stations and the simple work he had loved. And the realization filled him with an unexpected sadness. He found Shara in the Garden of Reflection on his last evening at the palace. She stood by the fountain where they had first met, and the sight of her brought back memories of how much had changed. Tomorrow you leave, she said without turning around, somehow knowing he was there. Yeah, Marcus replied, walking to stand beside her. Back to fixing engines and dealing with broken machinery. You could stay, Shara said quietly. Mother has offered you a position as chief advisor. You would have wealth, influence, the ear of the royal family. I know, Marcus said, and I'm honored, but that's not who I am. I'm not a politician or a diplomat. I'm just an engineer who got caught up in something way bigger than himself. Shara finally looked at him, and there was pain in her alien eyes. You've changed everything, she said. The way I see my people, the way I understand leadership, the way I think about what matters. When you arrived, I thought humans were primitive, simple, unworthy of teaching me anything. And now? Marcus asked with a slight smile. Now I think humans might be the wisest species in the galaxy, she admitted. Not because you have advanced technology or powerful militaries, but because you understand something we've forgotten. That strength without compassion is just cruelty. That power without empathy is just tyranny. Marcus reached out and took her hand. A gesture that would have been unthinkable when he first arrived. You didn't need me to teach you that, he said gently. You just needed permission to feel it. The Shara who cares about her people, who questions tradition, who values life over pride that was always inside you. But you showed me how to let her out, Shara insisted. Squeezing his hand, they stood in silence for a while, watching the water flow upward in its impossible patterns. What will you do? Marcus finally asked. Reform, Shara said with determination. I'm going to change how the Kalrish Empire operates. More transparency, more direct contact with citizens, more opportunities for common people to be heard. Mother supports it, especially after seeing how the negotiations succeeded. That won't be easy, Marcus warned. Tradition is powerful, and there will be resistance, which is why I could use your help. Shara turned to face him fully. I'm not asking you to be chief advisor. I'm asking you to be my friend. Someone I can call when I need perspective. Someone who will tell me the truth even when it's uncomfortable. That I can do, Marcus agreed. I might be back fixing engines, but communication works across the galaxy. You can always reach me. And you'll visit? She asked, and there was something vulnerable in her voice. Of course, Marcus promised. Someone has to make sure you don't backslide into the Ice Princess routine. Shara laughed. A sound that was becoming more common and more genuine. Ice Princess? She repeated with mock indignation. Is that what you called me? Only in my head, Marcus admitted. That first day, when you looked at me, like I was something unpleasant you'd stepped in. I was terrible to you, Shara said, her expression becoming serious. I treated you with contempt because I was scared. Scared that a human could teach me things I didn't know. Scared that my entire worldview might be wrong. Scared that I wasn't the person I thought I was. And what did you learn? Marcus asked. That being scared is okay, she replied. That admitting ignorance is the first step toward wisdom. The change is painful but necessary. All human lessons that my people desperately needed. The garden lights dimmed automatically as the evening deepened, casting strange shadows across the alien plants. There's something I need to tell you, Shara said hesitantly. Something I've been trying to find the words for. Marcus waited, giving her space to gather her thoughts. When I thought you were dying during the trial of sacrifice, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper, I realized that you had become the most important person in my life. Not because of what you taught me, but because of who you are. Marcus felt his heart rate increase. Shara, I know, she interrupted. I know that human and Kalrish don't form romantic bonds. That our species are too different. That it would be complicated beyond measure. But, Marcus prompted gently, but I needed you to know that you mattered to me, Shara said. More than duty, more than tradition. More than any of the things I was taught were most important. You matter because you're kind and brave and honest. And you make me want to be a better person. Marcus pulled her into a hug, something he had never dared to do before. She stiffened for a moment, then relaxed into the embrace. You matter to me too, he said into her shoulder. And for what it's worth, you're already an amazing person. You just needed to believe it yourself. They held each other as the garden's strange flowers released their evening scents. Two beings from different worlds who had found unexpected friendship in an arrangement neither had wanted. I should probably get back to packing, Marcus finally said. Reluctantly stepping back, I'll walk you to your quarters, Shara offered. They walked through the palace corridors. No longer the stiff, formal princess and the uncomfortable human, but two friends who had been through battles together at his door. Shara gave him a crystal pendant. This is the royal seal of friendship, she explained. "It means you're under the Queen's protection wherever you go. But more importantly, it means I'll always be with you in spirit." Marcus put it on. Feeling the weight of it against his chest, "I'll treasure it," he promised, the next morning. As Marcus boarded the transport that would take him back to the mining stations, he looked back at the Crystal Palace one last time. Shara stood on a balcony, watching him leave. And even from this distance he could see that she was crying. He raised his hand in farewell, and she raised hers in return 6 months later. Marcus received a communication that made him laugh out loud. Shara had implemented sweeping reforms, establishing a citizen council, creating direct communication channels between commoners and the palace, and mandating that all royals spend time living among ordinary people to understand their needs. Lord Tessic, of all people, had become her most valuable supporter, having undergone his own transformation after witnessing Marcus's sacrifice. But the message that made Marcus smile most was the last line. "The palace is installing a new infrastructure system, and the engineer they hired says the plans are terrible. Could you possibly take a look? I'd hate for something to explode." Marcus requested leave from his station and took the next transport to the capital. When he arrived at the palace, Shara was waiting in the Garden of Reflection, and this time when they embraced, it felt like coming home. "So," Marcus said with a grin, "I hear you need an engineer." "I need my friend," Shara corrected. "The engineering problem is just an excuse." "Good excuse," Marcus admitted. They walked through the garden together, talking and laughing. And Marcus realized that the royal edict had ended, but the friendship it created would last a lifetime. He was no longer just Marcus Chun, human engineer. He was Marcus Chun, friend to the princess, teacher, and student. Someone who had helped bridge the gap between two very different species. And as they discussed palace infrastructure problems and Shara's latest reform plans, Marcus thought about how strange and wonderful life could be. Had been commanded by royal edict to share his life with the Queen's daughter. And in doing so, he had found something he never expected. A sense of purpose, a friend who understood him completely, and proof that humans had something valuable to offer the galaxy. Not advanced weapons or superior technology, but something simpler and more profound. The ability to connect, to empathize, to care deeply despite differences, and to believe that change was always possible. It was the most human thing of all. And the galaxy was better for it. Marcus looked at Shara as she animatedly explained her plans for educational reform, her silver skin glowing in the garden light, and felt grateful for that unexpected summons all those months ago. Sometimes, he thought, the best things in life came from the situations you never wanted but couldn't avoid, and sometimes friendship was the greatest adventure of all.